So today we're doing some pot seasoning, and we have some different examples here of different types of clay pots and the seasoning methods that you would use to season them. Clay pot seasoning is all about hydrating the clay, getting some moisture into the clay body so that it's not so dry and brittle as it would be when it just comes out of the kiln. A dry, brittle clay pot in a hot oven or on the stovetop can crack. So you need to do this the first time before you use your clay pot. And usually with most clay pots, that will be the only time for the life of the pot that you'll need to do it. There's a few different methods depending on the pot and how it's been made, so we'll just go over those. One thing to point out, the difference between seasoning a clay pot versus which most people are used to hearing seasoning, which is involving a cast iron pot. They're completely different. With cast iron, it's about sealing up the metal, coating it with oil. With clay, it has nothing to do with that. It's about moisture and getting some moisture into the clay body. So here we have a Moroccan tagine, and it's been soaked. That's the first step in this type of pot's seasoning process, soaking it for 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, just a sink of regular tap water, normal temperature. If it's a really big pot, I've soaked pots in bathtubs before, so if you have a small sink, use your bathtub. You're just gonna take the lid off, and again, this has been soaked already for 2 to 3 hours, and then we'll just pour water in, about half, 3/4 full, just enough so that when the pot is in the oven for the 2 to 3 hour period following this, the moisture doesn't evaporate and the pot won't dry out. Or you won't have to keep checking it to make sure there's enough water in there. Put the lid on and then just pop that in the oven. That's a glazed pot, so some pots you would want to coat with olive oil, rub some garlic on there, which would help seal up the clay when it's heated, but a glazed clay pot, it's not necessary. You just want to get the water in there. So an example of a clay pot that is seasoned in the same process as that tagine, but that is unglazed, would be something like this little Moroccan tagine. No ceramic glaze on it whatsoever, just raw clay. In this pot, I would do a quick rub with, I would soak it first, 2 to 3 hours, again, in a sink of water, and then I would rub it either, you can rub it all over, or just for most people, some people may not like the look of what happens when you rub these with the garlic and the olive oil. It can darken the clay. If that's gonna be a problem, you could just rub the bottom, which is the surface that's gonna come in contact with the heat when it's on the burner. And you just scrub the garlic on there, just all over. Give it a good scrub. And the paste, what happens with this is the paste from the garlic sticks to the clay. And then when it's heated, it makes a harder, more durable surface. And then just take some oil, your fingers or paper towel, just rub it on there. It's gonna make your house stink. Again, you're gonna put some water in this, just like the other piece. This, you might wanna consider putting like 3/4 full in here, just because the raw clay may absorb the moisture faster than a glazed piece. Lid on, in the oven. So a couple other methods. One, same as the other, which is pre-soaking, filling with water, but this time it will be on the stovetop, not in the oven. This pot here, which is a Mexican bean pot, would be a good example of the type of clay vessel that would use that method, only because it's really tall and it can be hard to fit it in an oven. So with this pot, you would soak it 2 to 3 hours in a sink, put some water in here, half full. The amount of water isn't really super important. It's more about just getting enough water in the pot so that it doesn't evaporate and disappear during the second part of the heating process and your pot doesn't dry out. So we'll just put this on a heat diffuser, which is a metal plate. It will help the pot to heat up evenly, buffer the direct heat that comes in contact with the base of the pot. Pot will go on that. And then for a brand new clay pot, first seasoning, you want to put it on the lowest heat setting possible. Just leave it there 2 to 3 hours, or until the pot comes up to temperature, is simmering, and then just leave it for an additional 2 hours simmering to make sure that the moisture can get into the clay body. The third process, which is really commonly used for Italian-made and Spanish-made clay pots, and these are just methods recommended by the manufacturer of these pots, is just a soak. And it's just regular tap water, fill your sink overnight, 8 to 12 hours. For a lidded casserole, you can do lid and the base together. Just submerge the pot, make sure it's full on the inside with water, put the lid on, make sure the water covers the whole thing, and just leave it and forget about it. Next day, take it out, dump the water, dry the pot, good to go. And that will just need to be done one time for the life of the pot, and even if you don't use your pot for, say, 6 months, you shouldn't have to do it again. That's it. One other point to mention would be our oven pieces, which you could season for a short process, just maybe 2-hour soak in just water, and that's it. An example of that type of pot would be our Brams. These are great oven casseroles. You won't use these on the stovetop, so they don't come in contact with direct heat, but because you will be using them possibly in a hot oven, or you could use it in a wood-fired oven, it's good to give them a short soak, get some moisture into the clay so they can take the direct heat. 2 to 3 hours again in just a sink of regular tap water. You don't have to do the oven, you don't have to do the garlic and olive oil. So if you were just going to use these in a regular residential oven, or for any of our baking dishes that are just regular fired earthenware, you don't really have to season them before the first use, but it's good for them. So if you were in a rush and wanted to use them one time without seasoning, that would be fine, but we recommend that you do at least season them one time, and then just, that will get some moisture into the clay.